Hello, everyone. I hope you all are having a lovely Tuesday afternoon. We're super blessed. We're into the fall season. We just had daylight savings time, but we are still enjoying some really, really beautiful weather outside. So I hope you all are getting a chance to take all of that in. Again, thank you for joining us for the Convo presented by Leadership Indianapolis. I am Ebony Chappelle, and I lead programs, and communication for Leadership Indianapolis. We are a civic leadership nonprofit that believes that leadership is at its best in our city when it is multicultural, multi generational, and collaborative. For the past couple of weeks, we have been having these conversations with local leaders to discuss with them how they have navigated this time that we've been living in, some of the different changes that have appeared in their work and how they approach their work, as well as ideas about how we move forward with collaboration and equity. So today, I'm having another one of those conversations with a great group of panelists that I'm going to bring on here shortly. If you have any questions or comments throughout the course of our conversation, you can drop them in the comment box, and I may bring them on screen when we get to a later Q&A portion of our conversation today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our panelists and introduce them to you. So up first, we have Ceceily Brickley. As Director of Resident Success, Ceceily is focused on how the Gene V. Glick Company and Glick Philanthropies can develop and expand strategies that support residents through the Service Coordination Program, Resident Success Centers, and efforts to help vulnerable populations. Ceceily has a direct line of communication with property management teams and service coordinators to ensure Glick can quickly mobilize resident success services deemed important by on-site teams. She brings a passion for housing and community empowerment to this role. Her personal mission and professional background position her to support the Glick team in meeting residents where they are with the advocacy, information, and resources they need to live lives of dignity. Ceceily, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And you are a member of the current SKL class. Tell us just a tiny bit about what that experience has been like so far.
I am, and I feel like I should do the whoop whoop because I'm SKO class 45. It's been great. We had our first session a couple of weeks ago, and I think just being exposed to so many other leaders in the community, but us not leading with our titles, but really just getting to know each other as human beings has been really refreshing. And I'm really excited to see what the rest of our sessions and kind of time together just really unfolds in the way of new friendships and professional connections.
Awesome. And you all are our first class post
Yeah.
pan not I don't know if we're post pandemic era yet, but close enough to it, maybe.
We're trying to be. We're trying to get there.
Trying to get there. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And we also have with us Julie Goodman of the Arts Council of Indianapolis. Julie is responsible for the implementation of ACI strategic plan, organizational administration, and programming priorities, including grants and fellowships, services and support for artists and arts organizations, the city's public art program, the Indianapolis Arts Garden, Gallery 9 Too Far, the Indy Arts Guide, and Any Given Child in partnership with Indianapolis Public Schools. Ooh, that is a mouthful, Julie. You guys have a lot going on.
We need to edit that.
Oh, it's all good. It's just about, us taking our breath, people who are reading it out loud. As president and CEO, Julie specifically leads stakeholder engagement, advocacy, and resource development required to advance ACI's mission for fostering meaningful engagement in the arts by nurturing a culture where artists and arts organizations thrive. Julie, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ebony. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And we also have with us Tony Mason. Tony is with the Indianapolis Urban League and serves as their CEO and president and CEO rather. And he is a visionary leader with a passion for service. Tony has dedicated the majority of his career to initiatives designed to enhance the quality of life for Indianapolis residents. During his tenure as president and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League, the IUL has become a center for working families, expanded the Project Ready College and Career Readiness Program, increased health and wellness services, established an agency endowment fund, supported the engagement of young professionals in leadership and service through the exchange at IUL, of which I am a proud member, secured a National Urban League Entrepreneurship Center designation, and successfully hosted the 2019 National Urban League Annual Conference, which featured President elect Joe Biden and Vice President elect Kamala Harris, who they were at the time, but we know they have since been both elected. The Indianapolis Urban League has been acknowledged and recognized for its initiatives and impacts by the National Urban League, the United Way of Central Indiana, and the Indianapolis Recorder's Minority Business Magazine. Thank you for being here, Tony.
Thank you. Glad to be here with everyone today.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. The topic of today's discussion is the leadership stories of our time. Where do we go from here, and how do we work together to make it happen? I want to start with you, Tony, and then we'll just go around the room and let's talk about the events of the past year. We have been dealing not only with a global pandemic, we have also witnessed civil unrest and uprisings and a lot of just very dramatic change in the way that our society works. How has that impacted the work of the Indianapolis Urban League?
Oh, wow. Let me try to figure out where to begin. I think, we've all had to adjust over the past year and a half. And for us as the Indianapolis Urban League, it started with us having to go to a virtual operation while also trying to figure out how do we help so many people in the community meet the needs that were just emerging right before our eyes. We were getting a lot of inquiries from seniors in the community and other struggling families who were concerned with, how are we going to eat? When you think about the numbers of people who either lost their jobs, were furloughed, or experienced wage reductions as a result of the pandemic, it caused us to say, we're going to have to do some things that we historically have not done. So in partnership with Gleaners, Second Helpings, Prairie Farms, Radio 1 Indianapolis, Wish TV, we started conducting weekly drive-through food distributions. And so for over 80 consecutive weeks, we have distributed food supplies and other basic needs and resources to over 500 families per week. And at this point, we are now well over 100,000 people benefiting from those resources, including over 40,000 children. We also were at the table for the formation of the Indy Rents Initiative that is being executed by the city in partnership with the 13 community centers in the Urban League. And for our part in that effort, we know that we have helped almost 2,000 households to avoid evictions since that program launched last July of 2020. And so that's to the tune of a little over $5 million in emergency assistance. And it goes without saying, no program is perfect, but we do know that the city of Indianapolis has expended every single dime it has received for that purpose. Like most organizations, we launched virtual programs, but I can tell you, we leveraged the drive-through distributions to not only distribute food, we distributed shoes, toys. We partnered with IU Health to provide flu vaccinations. We conducted the census, as well as encouraged voter registration through that process. And then in partnership with Walmart earlier this year, we hosted a COVID-19 vaccination clinic where over 4,000 people got vaccinated here on site at the Urban League. And we're now in discussions with them about perhaps maybe even hosting booster shots here on site. And then with respect to advocacy, being at the table for the formation of the Corporate and Community Partners for Racial Equity. So the Urban League, Black Expo, NAACP, ACLU, and others were at the table with Cummins, Lilly, and several other corporations. And so we worked together at the State House to try to fight some of the bad policies and bills and legislation that were specifically targeting Indianapolis and Marion County. And then, of course, with all of this work being in the formative discussions around the Business Equity for Indy initiative, where a number of our corporations are coming together to address systemic issues and racial inequities, of course, in hiring and procurement, in education and health. And then last but not least, most people in the community are aware of the $100 million grant that the Lilly Endowment gave to the National Urban League. And I want to share that with the audience so that they're clear that the National Urban League received that grant, but it is a 5-year grant for work to be done here in Indianapolis, Marion County specifically, to improve the quality of living for African Americans with a focus on education, employment, health, employment, health, Black business development, and entrepreneurship.
Such great work being done. And I see so much alignment with what some direct needs are for people living in our community. So grateful that the Urban League is right there. And really quickly before Ceceily and Julie share, can you tell us what the status is of the $100 million that we've heard so much talk about here recently?
Yes, absolutely. And I forgot to add one other area where we hope to have impacts is in housing as well. And so we have recently completed 2 of our initial pieces of work connected to that, and one being a comprehensive opportunities assessment, where essentially we engaged African Americans at all levels of this community to get their feedback and their input around the challenges that African Americans face, as well as what are the opportunities that exist to improve the quality of living for African Americans in Indianapolis. The other part that we conducted was an issues prioritization process. We had several local consultants, as well as thought leaders, African Americans, broader community as well, get around the table and talk about, these 5 issues that we're dealing with: health, education, housing, Black business development, entrepreneurship, and to come up with what should be priorities or strategies for us to address. And so now that we have completed those 2 phases, our team is currently developing RFPs, because what we're going to do is we're going to have a 5-year grant making process. And so the first grant making cycle will be at the end of first quarter of 2022. We'll likely have a second grant cycle during 2022 as well, followed by additional grant cycles in 2023 and 2024. And so we're excited because we know that it's likely that with the first grant cycle alone, we will award at least $20 million in the community, maybe perhaps over the course of 2022, up to $40 million. And so again, we're excited. We know that it's going to create opportunities for nonprofits, and particularly Black-led nonprofits in this community, to work together with other thought leaders and experts to address the challenges that we're talking about that are decades old.
Right.
And so we know that things are not going to change overnight, but we're looking at this as a catalytic, transformative effort. And it's going to take all of us in order to accomplish that. So it's not just on the Indianapolis Urban League, it's on the entire community.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I'm still muted. Ceceily and Julie, please join in. And thank you, Tony. I'm going to add Michael Huber to the stream as well and introduce him in just a minute. But Ceceily, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting to hear, Tony. I know I sort of began the pandemic at United Way of Central Indiana and have since transitioned. But I know for me, I think the ability to quickly mobilize, and sometimes when you're in maybe the philanthropic or the nonprofit space, we're maybe slower to move because I think probably have to fight a little harder for the resources and have a lot of processes in place for grant administration, and you have to apply. And typically it's very process based. And what I appreciated about really our entire community and the network of community centers and funders is I saw people work together in a way that I had never seen. And that has been sustained, that we can't really talk about, to Tony's point, these issues are decades old, generations old. We can't really talk about things at a high level anymore. We have to really get specific in a way that the community is challenging and pushing back. If we're speaking at a high level about housing and not recognizing how that affects people at the individual level, I don't think we can have those types of discussions anymore, which has definitely changed my work. But I've also realized as an individual leader, I can't separate myself from my work in the way that maybe I used to try to have a certain work-life balance. I realize I show up as me, and I can't really separate who I am as a person from the work that I do. And that's just a season that I'm in. But I think the pandemic and everything we felt and experienced socially has contributed to the pressure I feel to create these clear divisions of this is who I am when I'm at home and with my friends, and this is who I show up as at work. And ultimately bringing that to whatever space I'm in, whether it's a community space as a board participant or leader, or my kind of day-to-day work.
I hear that so much, and it also makes me reflect, Ebony, on the message behind you. Just how do you feel, and the importance of us as leaders being open to that, and the importance of empathy in all of this work over the last almost 2 years now. So I appreciated the opportunity to just pause and reflect and think about how we're changing and evolving and growing because of these experiences. And for us at the Arts Council, we are the advocacy and services agency supporting the sector in Central Indiana, and that includes individual artists and arts and cultural organizations. So our job was really to support the sector so they could continue to support their mission of keeping us connected and helping us process what we're experiencing, and helping us heal as we come back together and recover and reopen. So the urgency that we're speaking about was very much a part of that. And I think we saw that from the very first days of the pandemic, when we were able to, we wanted to understand what the impact looked like, and we wanted to have data and facts to support the solutions and in our advocacy efforts. And so we started within, I think, the first 48 hours of the shutdown. We were able to do a survey and understand from 1,000 artists what the impact looked like on their lives and their work and their wellness, and also for organizations. And that looked like 30,000 closures and cancellations from March through September. We stopped counting after September because we started to, but everything was closed by then. So we were focused on reopening at that point. But we also knew the massive financial losses and the financial impact that it was having. And within a week, the first week, the philanthropic community here in Indianapolis came forward with $500,000 of support for relief funds for individual artists. And that really set the tone for the last 18 months. That level of urgency, intention, care. What we've heard from creatives over and over again is whether or not they needed to utilize those funds, and we've been honored to award more than 1,500 grants and almost $15 million of relief now during this time frame. But whether or not they needed to access those funds, and many did, the fact that our city valued them in that way and invested in their wellness and values creativity in our community in that way has just really shifted the way that creatives, I think, view themselves in the city. I mean, we're seeing this massive renaissance, right? Coming out of this massive boom in creativity, and they are absolutely supported in that from the city and the city of Indianapolis, from the CARES Act funding, and now the ARP funding. We're investing $1 million right now, like currently, 500,000 in individual artists, 500,000 in organizations in support. So I think that's the tone and intention that we've seen, the collaboration that we've seen in working with the philanthropic community, the corporate community, our city partners, and our civic partners. I've been with Michael on many forums and Tony on many forums, and I think that the opportunity to deepen our relationships, to create these forums of support, are the legacies of this work and collaborating in new ways as we're talking about today.
Thank you so much, Julie. Your point about care and intentionality and just moving swiftly is something that I think is a common thread throughout all of the things that we've heard so far. So thank you all so much. Michael, I'll give you a quick introduction. So happy to have you here, and then pose the same question to you.
Can
For
you
those,
can you hear me, by the way?
yes, I can.
Yeah.
You sound
Brought
great.
in, thank God, my team. They brought in the backup computer. Yes.
Good, good. We love that. We love
It's great.
that.
No,
Yes.
I don't have a lot to add to what Ms. Brickley
Hmm.
and Julie Goodman and Tony Mason said. I think
Yeah.
it's like, I guess if you're tuned in on this Leadership Indianapolis and you're in the Leadership Indianapolis network, it's like
Hmm.
there's a counterintuitive thing about a crisis where I think a lot of us learn that that's actually the time to pilot new things and do it fast, which is counterintuitive. You think, if it feels like the house is burning down, but it's actually a great time to try new things. And as I look at, and what Tony's doing, what Julie's doing, I don't know Ms. Brickley as well, but the Glicks are hugely influential through the company and the Glick Foundation, and a big influence on us as well. So trying new things has been big. We placed a bet in the spring of 2020 to cross train all of our employees. When we're fully staffed, we're 58 or 59, and all of our employees for at least 6 months just did small business services and small business lending, and we didn't know where it was going to go. And it turns out that was the best thing we could have done, because we learned so much about the vulnerability of small businesses. And it also created like this kind of like, forgive the military, like the foxhole experience. You know what I mean? Because you were working, the events people were working maybe with the accounting people and people they didn't get to work with. So trying new things, it's always a team sport. So everything that we worked on was meaningful involved another organization or organizations, literally everything. And if we had more time, we could point to exciting things that we're working on in conjunction with the Urban League and with the Arts Council and others. So, using the crisis to pilot new things, always pursuing it as a team sport. I'll say the other thing too is, for us, it also provided, not like chambers of commerce in our city and in other cities have a historically terrible record on issues of racial equity, terrible, and maybe with few exceptions. And so we put a stake in the ground 4 years ago, inspired by people on this call and Brian Payne and others, to make building a more inclusive economy a pillar of our organization. And that work's ongoing. We got a long way to go. We were able to speed up certain things in 2020 and 2021 that we've needed to do for a long time, because we felt that the disproportionate impacts of COVID on people of color, George Floyd, and all the awareness around policing and things like that allowed us to make certain changes. Our policy approach, the policies that the business community advocates for, that we've known we needed to do for a long time, but we thought we've got more awareness and in a sense, horsepower out there in the community. So let's make those changes. So there's a lot more there, but I appreciate the question.
Absolutely. And you provide a really good segue to the part B of this question, which is around institutional reconciliation. That had been a big point of discussion over the past 2 years. And it feels like we've been sped up maybe 5-10 years into the future where, things are happening that maybe should have always been happening. You talked a little bit about some of the different policies that you all looked at within the Indy Chamber. Are there things that you feel could have been done differently? And then I'll open up that question to everyone else as well. And you could also add things that you learned along the way through this process. But the main point is, what are some things that you feel like could have been done differently with regards to that?
So, I think of like 20 things, Ebony, but I'll think of the most obvious things first. Because we're a business organization, the lack of resources for the small business owner, particularly small business owners who are people of color, just, early on, just the challenge. Like everybody's like, oh, PPP, billions of dollars into the system. And we found out initially that if you're a small business owner, it was going to be harder for you to get PPP. If you were a small business owner of color, or to a certain extent a female business owner, then you were going to have other, additional challenges to that. So, that may have been a missed opportunity. I think a lot of us did what we had to do to try to mitigate that. The other thing, the political environment is so bad right now, Tony. I think conversations we have, it's almost like the national toxicity has bled into the state and local politics. There's more posturing and performative stuff out there, and it becomes harder to kind of separate what's real than what you have to deal with if you're working in politics. And so, what I think, it's like we need more unifying forces, and I think all of us on this call, we're in companies and organizations. The Glicks are definitely a unifying force. It's challenging all of us to stretch farther, to reach beyond the people that we're just used to calling when we have troubles, the people in our immediate networks, and reach out farther and form those relationships. And I feel that, and that's where I was like, man, some of these, Tony, it's like, some of these partnerships, and you've helped us form a lot of partnerships too. We're like, why weren't we doing this 10 years ago? But I do think all of us who have roles in these civic institutions, we have a responsibility to reach out a little farther and to be a unifying force in an environment that is harder and harder to get people to agree on things like racial equity or vaccines or, et cetera. I'll stop there.
Ebony, I'll jump in, I guess. We've learned so much, and we've been able to apply so much of what we've learned during this time. And I think for us, it really was about intention and specificity. Am I saying that right way?
It's a tricky one, but we know what you mean.
Specific in how we were applying those learnings. I from the very earliest moments, I remember Keisha Dixon, who's the executive director of the Asante Art Institute. We've been having calls and forums with arts leaders since the beginning of the pandemic. About 80 to 100 arts leaders were with us. And these are large organizations to our smallest organizations, in community together, in conversation together. And she said, I want to be very clear, and we've heard this many times across all of our work, that we may have all been in the same storm, but we were not in the same boat. And we saw the same disproportionate impact on artists of color and organizations that are led by serving our communities of color. And so from the very beginning, because we had that intention, we were able to be specific in how we were supporting those organizations and artists. And through that intention, through our call process, through our outreach process, through collaboration with other partners, we were able to ensure that this year, for the first time in 34 years, the City of Indianapolis Annual Grants Program, 40% of the top 10 awards went to organizations led by or predominantly serving communities of color. That happened because we changed our evaluation criteria, and we did that together as a sector. We did that with input from the sector. And on the relief side and the artist recovery side, because of that intention, we were able to ensure that 50%, and in some cases over 50% of those grants and that funding went to support artists of color. And so I think that's one element, that's one measure of many. But as we've looked at the other dimensions of our work, and we're doing a self-assessment like many of us are, it's just unlocking all of these opportunities for us to apply that same level of intention, that same specific action to every single dimension of our work, of our process, of our policies. And I think that's the learning is that its commitments are not enough. We all had commitments. In our sector, we've had commitments for years, but it is about action and accountability. And we're having conversations together, learning together, holding each other accountable in ways that we didn't see before. And so we're really grateful for that.
Thank you both for sharing. Ceceily, Tony, anything to add there?
Not a whole lot. I would just say, I've been really excited to join the Gene B. Glick company. And even my title is sort of telling in terms of what I prioritize, right? Resident success, to have the opportunity to center residents. I do think, we've seen a culture shift in genuinely, we really want living at a Glick property to enhance the lives of residents. I really believe that that's really woven throughout the fabric of the company. But this has really sparked a dialogue about access to services for all residents, where, service coordination, we've traditionally been in affordable properties where, again, understand the demographics there and have really worked alongside property management, even through the pandemic, to access, really help residents access more than $2 million in rental assistance. So not only are we actively participating, we're really working with residents to make sure that every step of the way, in terms of a complicated process, they have advocacy and stewardship. But what does that mean for communities that, might be conventional or traditionally not thought of? And there are a lot of residents in those spaces that sort of, I think I feel similarly to how I grew up, where my mom made too much money for any type of assistance, but we really didn't have a lot of money. So you think about people who are maybe renting conventionally, but we know probably can't afford to be renting conventionally. I think it's just changed some of the discussions even internally around, to your point, how are we stretching beyond maybe what we're already doing and thinking about what else we can be doing and how else we can be supporting. So, alongside what's already been said, I just appreciate it. It's a mind shift. And I see that being a sustainable mind shift, even in the housing space, where, again, we recognize that we have a lot of issues around housing in our city. And that's something that I feel we need to talk more about. But also, I feel privileged to be able to center, residents in that discussion and get their input on the experience they're having and really what's their home.
That's wonderful. Go ahead, Michael.
There is.
Oh, I think, and then we'll go back to Tony. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry. There is. Ceceily just made me think of something. There is an imperative, though. Tony, I'm going to ask you. I've learned a lot about this from you. I want to make sure it's not conveyed as, la la la, because I know I don't think like this, and Julie don't either. Our organizations are changing. There is a very real risk, especially in the mainstream corporate community, that within the next year we could be like, oh wow, we really did some good work. Let's move on to the next challenge, right? And then if undoing racism and moving the needle in a meaningful way on racial equity is a high priority, that it moves down the priority. There's a very real risk of that. There's a very real risk of the politics further infecting communities. And so while I am very encouraged at what I've seen and everything that I'm learning, because we got a long way to go, I'm also reminded we could take two steps back. But Tony, I learned a lot from you on this, so I don't mean to preempt you.
And Tony, you're still mute. There you go. Thank you.
I must have done that to myself. Hats off, obviously, to Julie, Ceceily, and Michael for everything that they've been doing individually and through their organizations. I will tell you, I would like to think that for those of us who are capable, we become a lot more human, because we think about poverty and basic needs. I mean, and think about it again. 30% of our community's African-American population is poor. And then we know from the United Way ALICE data, what is it, 44 or 45% of all folks in Indianapolis and central Indiana are either poor or working poor. To see the lines, not only at our drive-through distribution efforts, but all over the city. So just kind of underscored the poverty that exists. And then you add a layer of that of people who maybe have perhaps never experienced those struggles, not knowing where to go, what to do, where to turn. And so hopefully what will bind us together to continue to do this work long term is we see the sense of hopelessness that so many people in our community have, and understand what that can mean when we think about creating new opportunities, whether it be for individuals and for parents and for students and for business owners. If we can't convey that there's authenticity and real commitment behind that work, we won't be able to successfully move those numbers. And what Michael is saying is very real, because one of the greatest threats to everything that I think that we've been working on the past year and a half is just this whole movement behind critical race theory. Because it's not really about what's being taught in schools. It is to stifle any work or conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, period. And so we know that there are teachers and superintendents and folks that are losing their jobs or putting themselves at risk for just being educators. Because we know CRT is not being taught, but it's such a threat. And so the beauty in it is that it has forced us all to stretch ourselves in how we do our work, who we partner with. We have had several grassroots community organizations and leaders and faith-based leaders and entities that come to us and help us in this distribution effort, taking things back to the neighborhood level. We're at the table with the corporate community, with Business Equity for Indy, as well as the corporate and community partners for racial equity, inclusive growth, as well as the work that a number of our civic organizations are doing to get at racial equity and inclusion. And so, again, we have to recognize that we can't take a bow a year from now and say, look what we did over the past 2.5 years. When, as we shared earlier, we've got decades of damage that we have to undo in order to put people on a path towards even having a positive spirit, if we can work towards prosperity and improving your condition.
Yeah, there is so much work to do. And we actually have some questions from the audience that kind of speak to what you just queued up, Tony. And I'm going to mix these two questions together because I feel like there's some synergy. Our first question is asking specifically about how resources can reach an area that has been neglected. And this is coming from someone that is directly in that community. Thank you very much for all that you do individually and through your organizations. How can your resources reach my area? Raymond and Keystone, Garfield, Fountain Square. They mentioned that the new Justice Complex is thriving. Meanwhile, their community struggles with homelessness, drug addiction, and a massive food desert. It has become one of the most violent areas in the city, according to the question asker. Just want you great people to know that our community is being majorly neglected. And then there's another question that comes in asking about help for those who have language barriers. So if anyone has anything to share with regards to resources or connections for both of those concerns that were brought up, would love to hear them.
Hopefully the entire city, because we recognize that there are pockets of poverty, concentrated poverty all over Indianapolis and Marion County. And so we definitely understand that there are challenges in a number of neighborhoods across the city. So hopefully not only the work that we're doing at the Urban League through the Quality of Life Initiative, because I do believe that if we can help the African American community, a rising tide can lift all boats. But let me say this, the American Rescue Plan dollars that the city has, if those dollars are effectively deployed, I think we have a chance to have some improvement in neighborhoods all across our community. The challenge will be is making sure that we effectively communicate the availability of dollars and resources to all levels of the community, because sometimes that's part of the challenge, is that even at the neighborhood or grassroots level, people do not hear about the available resources and things of that nature. And then also making sure that people are prepared to receive help and assistance becomes important, because sometimes the navigational part of what has to happen in helping a person go from that email or that phone call or that text message being plugged in and connected to resources is going to be critical. And I do want to share this. We have a number of neighborhood community centers that have a lot of resources, programs, and services that are available. So I would want to encourage everyone that, again, no matter how imperfect an organization or its leader may be, Because oftentimes I hear that, well, this person isn't doing that, or they aren't doing this. Go inside, go online, find out what resources they have, and get connected. Because again, a lot of good people and good organizations are actually doing work across the community.
The only thing I have to add to that on the second question, I know for a fact, Julie, Tony, Ceceily, we're hiring more Spanish speakers in our organizations. So that's part of it. I think by my last count, we have 6, maybe 7, still probably not enough. For us, it's like, if we want to represent the Indianapolis business community, we must represent the business community in its full diversity. And that means, like, for us, it's just, you've got to have people fluent in Spanish on your staff. Yes. That's just a start. We have a Hispanic Business Council whose membership has been growing, which gets into, the unique issues that Spanish speaking, Hispanic, Latino business owners face. It's Anthony's question. The only thing I would add to what Tony said is there are more resources for small business than are known. The thing I will say, and I say this a little bit at the risk, I'm going to say something, Anthony, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm putting it back on you to do the work, but I'm going to say it. I have seen there's several case studies of overlooked, under-resourced, underappreciated neighborhoods in Indianapolis that through partnerships, because it's always a team sport, through partnering with adjacent communities or institutions can do a lot. So where my mind goes is, how's your neighborhood, or are they pretty well organized? Do they have a relationship with the University of Indianapolis? Do they have a relationship with Fountain Square, areas that are adjacent, Garfield Park, areas that are adjacent to where you are? Because it's not fair. Well-organized neighborhoods, oftentimes, regardless of the income level or whatever factors, are the ones that are able to play offense, and a lot of times you can do that through partnerships. And we do have a lot of people in our city who really know how to partner effectively. Now, I almost hesitate to say that because I don't want to sound like I'm throwing it back on you, Anthony, but those are the first questions that come to mind.
Yeah, I would only add in terms of connection, I do recognize it can be difficult sometimes to even know what's going on, who to ask, who to reach out to, because it can seem complicated, especially when you're maybe not interested in going after funding, but you just want to know what's going on in your community. So don't hesitate to reach out to people. Just to tell a quick story, we had a resident, and I'll preface, like, don't reach out to Marianne Glick, but she found Marianne on LinkedIn and reached out to her about a particular issue. And then Marianne circled back with me like, hey, what are we doing about this at this particular property? And like, I was really impressed by the initiative the resident took to figure out, hey, I'm going to find you on LinkedIn, send you a message, and give people an opportunity to be held accountable. I think it's good to hold people accountable, and then also just make sure that, to Michael's point, not to put it back on you, but don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions, and then just put yourself out there to get information that you might share with the broader community. Even if you're not the person to go after those resources, you might have the information they need so that they can. And I've seen that be effective.
Yeah, I mean, we see the same things, and I think it is about, again, about intention and specific support, specific goals on representation and participation in these programs, in the program design, and then continuing to adjust as we go through. So I think, there's so much support right now. There are so many opportunities. It's overwhelming. If I think about just our organization, we have like 6 open calls just for programs we're administering. And then we are a amplifier of all the other support programs that exist. It's a lot. So I think it's recognizing that it's on us to streamline, to simplify, to try and be as clear as possible, but also to provide the support, the one-on-one support in applying. I mean, we've been working with artists that some of them never applied for support. We helped them navigate unemployment benefits. I mean, there were all these categories of support that so many of us hadn't interacted with before, not in these ways. So I think just being proactive and knowing that there is support available, but we don't know what we don't know sometimes in terms of what we're missing. So I appreciate the question a lot.
Thank you all for your thoughtful responses on that. We've discussed so much in our time together. We've talked about some of the work that has been done in navigating this extremely challenging period that we've all been through. When you think about what it takes to move into the next phase, not going back to normal, I think anybody that's waiting on going back to normal, maybe don't wait on that. But what does it look like to move forward together and go from here in the spirit of equity and collaboration? Any thoughts on that?
I got just one. I'm thinking about who's tuning into this. Hierarchical organizations are going to struggle. If you can't, you got to create as much radical transparency within your organization as you possibly can, to the extent, I mean, for us, it makes you uncomfortable because things change fast out in the environment, and then your people have to be empowered to make decisions very fast. So I don't know, I'm seeing a different kind of leader emerge, exemplified by my, three co-panelists for sure. It's just a different, and then being closed off and clinging to information, having more of a proprietary view of information, that's not going to work, So I guess I'm trying to think of, I'm thinking more of like, what styles of leadership have I observed that have been pretty effective, in this period of very fast change.
Yeah, I really appreciated recently, my leader asked me, what my hopes kind of and dreams were in this role. And when I think about communities and residents, and I think even the framing of questions is different in this season. Yes, we're goal setting, we're doing quarterly goals and thinking about what we can measure, but that was almost the secondary question. The real question was, where do I really want to see true impact for residents? And that helps me to think bigger than just, we could quantify this much in basic needs or this much in rental assistance. Those things are important. They're always going to be important. But then you have to start asking different questions of those you serve, and you can't have a table that they are not actively participating in. So, for leadership kind of moving into this, to your point, Ebony, I don't know if it's normal. It's just really the next season for us as a community has to involve at every level, individuals who are affected, folks who are making decisions. And I know we always, I think about a seat at the table and what that means. It kind of depends on who you ask. And I don't think we can have even discussions like this without factoring in the perspectives of those that we serve. So I think some of it as a leader, making sure that while, yes, we're focused on what we can quantify and what that means for our respective organizations, we're also thinking about how people are meaningfully connected to the work that they do, and that those are the folks that we're really bringing into our respective organizations. And they will, to Tony and Michael's point, especially make sure that we don't drop the ball on a lot of the progress that has been made, and that the conversation doesn't become convoluted and overly political, but it stays about people, and people are able to be authentic and really bring, who they are to what they do.
I mean, I completely agree with all of that. And, I think the other things that I appreciate, and I've seen, I was new to Indianapolis. I was in my role about a year when the pandemic hit, and I had spent the first year in a listening tour, connecting with the community. And I think the shifts that I see, and I agree with Michael completely, that the hierarchical organization, that style of leadership is over. It is over. And I think the deepening of relationships, that humanity, allowing people, really encouraging people to bring them their whole selves. The purpose of work has never been more important. But breaking down silos, I think, has been a benefit of the disruption. It really has broken down silos. And also, I've really seen a shift in growth mindset. And I know that's kind of a buzzword, but I think where I started, I was seeing a lot of scarcity mindset, a lot of turf, and I think that, again, this disruption has just broken down some of those myths, and we have this opportunity to really be entrepreneurial, to be innovative, to partner in new ways. And we're seeing it within our organizations, within our sector, within our civic sector, within our city. So I think those are the things that are really fueling us going forward.
Yeah, I would just say, and I agree with everything that has been said, just really the commitment to long-term work and with, representation at all of the tables. And we're talking about multi-generation, multiracial. The commitment to the work is just going to be so critical. And so I know when we talk about work-life balance, the reality of it is we long ago moved into an era of work-life integration, and how we manage that and integrate self-care into the mix is going to be important. But what we can't afford to have happen is all of the competing narratives and the politics that gets in the way of us doing what we need to do as leaders to address the critical challenges that people are facing in our community. We cannot allow the politics to veil or hide the fact that so many people are struggling in our community, and it's not just Black people, it's not just Latinos. There are poor whites here, there are poor Asians, and we want Indianapolis to really become the best version of itself in a place where all people thrive. That we're going to be committed to that, all of the other narratives aside.
Tony, what a wonderful way to wrap up the conversation. Thinking about the very best that we could possibly be as a city. I think it makes sense right here to say that all of you all have exemplified that through the work that you are doing and will continue to do in our community from your perspective platform. So thank you all so much for this great conversation. Julie Goodman of the Arts Council of Indianapolis, Ceceily Brickley of Glick Properties, Michael Huber from the Indy Chamber, and Tony Mason of the Indianapolis Urban League. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ebony.
Awesome. And thank you all for tuning in for today's Convo. You can find out more about Leadership Indianapolis at leadershipindianapolis.com. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can keep up with us and learn more about our programming and our initiatives here in the community. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.